Ireland has come a long way in recent years to becoming a more diverse, tolerant and inclusive country, but parents can still feel very uncomfortable when it comes to opening up the lines of communication about their child's sexual orientation.
So what can parents do? Well, Richard Hogan, Clinical Director of Therapy Institute and columnist with the Irish Examiner, joins us on the line now. Good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
We're very well, thanks, this Saturday morning, Richard. We know it's such a big moment in people's lives when they are coming out, but for parents also, why can it be a struggle for parents?
I think it's a very good question, Aidan, and I think it's such an important conversation this morning on the eve of Pride Week beginning tomorrow. I think parents can really struggle with their child's identity for a number of reasons, but I suppose one of the greatest influencers in our life is the family that we grew up in. And so I suppose parents today grew up in the 70s and 80s, and their parents would have grown up, maybe in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And as a result of that, homosexuality was outlawed in Ireland until '93. It was considered a mental health disorder in the DSM up until the late 80s, early 90s. So all of those factors feed into how we kind of think about the nature of love and who we love. So I think parents can struggle with it because they have these, negative ideas around what the neighbours will say. So we've all social construction feeding into our ideas about the notion of gender and the notion of love and the ideas around identity. So I think parents can struggle with it, but thankfully I think we've moved on from those anachronistic ideas. I think the 2015 same-sex referendum was a seminal moment in our state. I think it was a moment where we really grew up as a country, where we did, as you said there in the introduction, we've moved from a homogenous society to one that is diverse. So I think it's getting better, but there's a long way to go just yet.
Richard, the very fact that we're having this conversation today about coming out to your parents, when Philip Schofield came out a few months back, the general conversation, the consensus was along the lines of it would be great to have a society where you don't need to come out, you're just valued for the person that you are, and yet still that structure is in place, that journey is in place for most young people today. So have we progressed, really?
I think it's a very good point, Laura. I wrote about that in the Irish Examiner, actually, about Philip Schofield's coming out, because I was saying exactly that it illuminated for me how far yet we have to go. I think the fact that we still think in terms of LGBTQI, that we have these reductionist ideas and letters to define who we are far more complicated than being defined by letters. I think there still is a huge way to go. A study by the Union of Ireland for Civil Liberties in 2018 found that Ireland has one of the highest hate crimes against transgendered population. So we do have a long way to go just yet, I think, Laura, and I don't think we're there yet. I think the fact that we're having this conversation shows us that there's a lot of progress yet to be done, because a truly inclusive society, one that really nurtures progression and diversity, doesn't think in terms of letters. It doesn't think in terms of gender. It doesn't think in terms of sexual orientation. Those things don't matter. We just celebrate being human beings on this planet, and that's where we're trying to get to, but we haven't got there just yet.
Hear, hear. If a parent wants to broach the conversation with their son or daughter, what advice do you have, Richard? And in terms of setting the right environment to even begin that conversation, how do you do that?
Yeah, in my clinic, Aidan, I'd have a lot of parents come into me and ask me, and they ask that question, what I think my son or daughter's gay, what should I do? And I always answer the same way. I say, look, whether your child is a member of the LGBTQ community or not, your job as a parent is to cultivate an environment that allows them to be who they want to be. When the family system is nurturing, a child doesn't think in terms of being accepted. They will think in terms of when they decide to make that declaration, as you said, it's a very big moment in someone's life about coming out, that they will be celebrated for who they are. I mean, the world can seem sometimes lacking in magic, but when you as a parent in the family set up a system in the family that's nurturing, that it allows for diversity, when your child eventually tells you about who they are, that will be a celebration. That's pure magic. And I think that's what parents need to do. Also, I'd say to parents, what I hear a lot in the clinical space is things like this. I don't mind my child being gay. I just know it's a harder life. And I point out to parents, it's only harder because of statements like that.
Other statements that you mentioned as well, Richard, which I would imagine most of us are guilty of, because all we want as parents is to protect our children from anything that might ever harm or hurt them or be an upset for them. But another thing that really struck me is that you say parents all the time say to their children, I love you no matter what. I will love you no matter what you tell me. And that actually might have slightly negative connotations.
I think it does have negative connotations, and I would say to parents, you're implicitly telling your child, I'll even love you if you're gay.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a negative connotation in there. So I'd say to parents, try to avoid that type of language. Try to avoid thinking in really linear terms around sexuality. We've been attacked by a virus, Laura, that had no interest in gender, had no interest in wealth, power, status, creed, religion, sexuality. It just indiscriminately attacked us. And because of that, we all came together and we all fought against it. So we need to move into that mindset. So when someone from our community who's in a minority, let's say, is attacked or a pejorative is launched against them, we need to all come together, because when someone is attacked like that, we're all attacked. When someone in our society is, targeted because of their sexual orientation, that's an attack on all of us, and we all have to stand up against it. And that's what Pride Week, I think, means for me, because I know, working in, therapy, that there are many children out there today sitting down listening to this with their parents, worried about their sexual identity. But something like Pride Week tells them, you're not alone, you're not weird, and you are normal. And that's such an important message for children to hear.
And Richard, on the conversation of parents having a conversation with their son or daughter, is the onus on the parents, or should they just wait until their child is ready to have or not have that conversation?
It's a very good question, Aidan. I would say, in my experience from talking to adolescents around this, and I asked them, what would you rather? They generally say to me, I knew my mom or father had a sexual curiosity, an interest in my sexual identity, but I wanted them to wait for me to be ready. And what can happen is parents can feel that their child's reticence illuminates the fact that their relationship isn't as close as they thought. So they can be a bit hurt when their child isn't revealing to them about their identity. But really, it's important that you don't pry in their identity. You give them the space to come out, because, as you said there, Aidan, it is a big moment in someone's development and maturation and identity. It's a really big moment. So allow them the space to do it, and don't put sexual labels on your children. I mean, we are terrible as a species to label each other. And that's just about, making the word simple for us. And the word isn't simple, and identity isn't simple. So just try to stay away from labeling your children, because they won't thank you for it. In fact, they'll come to resent you if you're labeling them.
Richard, thanks, as always, for your insight. Such an important conversation for us to have here on the show. And thank you. We'll see you again very soon. Stay safe.